If we just encourage some more conversation and building community, we can find shared solutions because everybody loves wolves. Everybody also loves their cattle and their livelihood. And there's ways to make both of these things work. And I think it's given me the ability to go to different groups of people and find places of commonality where we think they might not exist. And my favorite example is that most ranchers, most farmers, most people in ag agree that climate change is an issue, but let's not talk about it as climate change. Let's talk about it as drought. And let's talk about it as changing migration patterns of animals.
Yeah. Let's talk about creating a life and country we're proud of. Together, I'm your host, Alvina Vasquez. Welcome to Alvina Talks Shift. Today, I'm so excited to have Shad with me. Shad and I worked together a couple years ago on the Polis campaign, and actually we've become really good friends since. And Shad has embarked on a whole new career path, which I'm super excited to talk about today. Hi, Shad.
Hey, Alvina, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing just fine.
I always love hangout time with you because you always have such good insights on what's going on in the party and in the politics world. Way more insight than me.
I don't know about that, but hopefully I'll be able to share some exciting things that are afoot in Colorado.
What's your title? What are you doing?
So I am the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party. I was elected back in April, and it's a 2-year term.
So when I started on the campaign, I had never engaged in party politics. I've had very little experience with it. One time I caucused for Senator Jesse Danielson at the time, when she was in, I believe she was still in the House when I caucused for her, and that was the first time I'd gone through that process. My parents never had an experience until Obama and Hillary caucused, and they were so excited about it. Those were way different experiences from what I've heard. The Hillary Obama caucus was like hundreds and hundreds of people at the school, and Jesse Daniels' caucus, I think, was like 50 people, at the local elementary school. But I think the point is, this is such an inside game sometimes that people that even participate in it don't even know what the impacts are and where they're doing it. And then we just came out of Iowa caucuses. So what does that all mean? What are caucuses? How does the party work? What are these ins and outs that many of us, like, living outside of politics, going about our day, don't know about?
Well, Colorado is one of the few states left that still has a caucus system to put candidates on the primary ballot. We've actually moved on from the presidential caucus system. We only have a presidential primary, and Colorado's primary date for the presidency is on March 5th, Super Tuesday. So we share it with a number of other states, and then we elect delegates according to the results of that presidential primary. So they're proportionate to the percentage that each candidate gets. However, for county commissioners, state house members, state senate, governors, U.S. senators, they all have the caucus system available to them, which is where, exactly like you said, groups of individuals will first meet within their precincts that they live in to collectively gather and start the process of supporting candidates through their House district, Senate district, county conventions, and assemblies. And for most candidates, they're going to go through the assembly process. And for presidential delegates, they're going to go through the convention process. Technology is amazing. And a lot of these caucuses now happen virtually or hybrid. And it's become a major priority of mine to make sure that this process, they can be kind of complicated. It can be a little bit intense to go into a room virtually or in person with your neighbors and talk about politics and align yourself with a candidate. We've been trying to make sure it's as accessible as possible to everyone who wants to be involved. And so it's an exciting process, but Colorado is indeed one of the few states with this process still intact.
So who gets to participate? Like, can anybody just go to caucus?
Yeah, so if you're a registered Democrat or a registered Republican, you can go to your respective caucuses. There are some timelines and dates associated with when you need to be registered by to participate, but every county is putting on a precinct caucus. Those will happen between March 7th and March 9th, and then the next stage are the county conventions and assemblies. Those happen over the course of the month of March. Some of them will happen sooner than others. This all culminates in the state convention and assembly, which will be happening virtually on April 13th, 2024. And along the way, candidates for state house, state senate, Congress, CU region will try to work their way to get onto the primary ballot.
So I guess one thing I didn't understand, do Republicans do the same thing that Democrats do?
Yeah, so this is actually in statute. It's not just a Colorado
Oh,
Democratic
interesting.
rule. Candidates in Colorado can either caucus onto the ballot, they can petition onto the ballot, or they can do both. And the thresholds for both change depending on the direction they decide to go in.
So what national impact does Colorado's system have on, like, what's happening on the national stage?
Yeah, so because our presidential primary is on Super Tuesday, we will then elect delegates at our state convention to then go to Chicago and help nominate our candidate for the president of the United States. Joe Biden is running a great campaign. He is well liked by Colorado Democrats, and so we suspect that he's going to have a great night, not only on Super Tuesday, but also have a strong delegation headed to Chicago. But we do have numerous Democrats running for the presidency, and so the president does have to re-earn his spot to make sure he's our nominee in the fall.
I kind of want to switch over to the national political scene because we already see, the Iowa caucus brings up, kind of re-energizes this whole media circus on the election in November. As you and I know, this is super early for voters to be paying attention, but we see all these polls um, that Biden's numbers are low, that it's going to affect the November election. What's your take on that?
You know, the president has had a remarkably successful term. He's delivered millions and millions of dollars to resources to states. Inflation is low, gas prices are low. We just enrolled 20 million people into the Affordable Care Act. Coloradans are seeing tons of jobs being created as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, thanks to all Colorado Democrats at the federal level, and especially Senators Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper, who really pushed in a tough Senate dynamic to get these bills passed. The thing that I keep holding on to is that the majority of voters don't think Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee, and most of them don't want to vote for Donald Trump. And so while the polls look a little hairy right now, and you might be wondering why it's so close, most of the country hasn't settled in on the fact that it's looking increasingly likely that it's going to be Donald Trump versus Joe Biden again.
So, big picture, outside of party politics, what does polling mean for in the political sphere?
Yeah, polling is really important. I think it can give us a sense of direction on how the country feels. And right now, you have a Republican Party who's focused on banning books. They're telling women what they can and can't do with their own bodies. And they're focused on giving the wealthiest among us giant handouts. And you see the Democratic Party fighting to create jobs, make healthcare more affordable, more accessible, to allow women to have the right to do what they want to do with their own bodies and to manage their own reproductive health. And we know that the majority of the country agrees with the Democratic agenda. And so it's up to us to make sure that they see the clear difference between us and this really far right MAGA grip that has taken over the Republican Party. This isn't Bob Dole's Republican Party anymore. Donald Trump has a firm grip on it. And unless you're Lauren Boebert, you likely don't have as much of a home in that party as you think.
That's interesting that you bring up Bob Dole. I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Hey, you know,
You brought up Bobert. So I didn't realize, I learned this when I was interviewed about this, that I didn't know, that in Colorado, you don't have to live in your congressional district to represent it. Anybody can represent anything. So if I wanted to run for Congress, I could run for Denver, even though I don't live in Denver.
right.
What is the benefit of that? Is that something we want? I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, it's funny because everybody knows my wife is Carrie Donovan, and we were drawn out of CD3 by the skin of our teeth. And Carrie didn't feel comfortable running for CD3, having been drawn out, even though everyone was pushing her to continue to run. And Lauren Boebert actually criticized Carrie for that. The funny thing is now Lauren Boebert has gone to the other side of the tunnel and has carpetbagged her way into a total other district that she knows nothing about, just to save her political skin. And it's just the most cowardly thing you can imagine. It's exactly why people hate politics. And I just cannot think of a better avatar for why people are so sick of the MAGA far right and of these self serving politicians that have just decided to take Donald Trump, mold themselves after him a little bit, and run with it. And so Lauren Boebert is a total coward and is just kind of misusing the system for her own political gain. Which,
But should we, like, change that? Is there
yeah, I
something we
mean,
should put I mean, is there a benefit to that or no benefit, we should just change it and make it like, if you're running for Congress, you need to live where you work?
yeah, I'm not sure how we would do that. I think I do at least have the trust in the voters that they are going to take carpetbagging for what it is and not reward it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's kind of what my answer was, but yeah, I didn't realize that was a thing.
Right.
I know that you don't do this full time. You also have a ranch.
Yes. Unfortunately, I do both full time, which doesn't leave a lot of room for anything else.
What is it like to live on a ranch?
It's really fun. It's also
Is it, like, really like those movies where you, like, fix the fence at 5 in the morning and you're rounding up horses and cows? Is it like what TV shows?
it's everything. It's as close to Yellowstone as the West Wing was to politics. It's a lot dirtier. It's a lot sillier, and the problems that happen are things that you least expect. I wish it was as cool as Yellowstone, but it is just every bit as rewarding. And so, I mean, this weekend the bulls, broke their fence, and so the fence needed to be repaired and the bulls needed to be rounded up and put back in. And I've got to reinforce this fence later this week to make sure that they don't do it again. We have to find a meat processors almost every year because Colorado doesn't have enough meat processors, and so we're constantly
Oh,
hunting
wow,
for
I
new
didn't
business
realize that.
partners. Yeah, we are raising for beef and we're trying to grow our herd. So all of our calves made it through the late fall. They're making it through the winter, and we're bound to have another 8 to 10 calves this year. And so we're continuing to grow our fold and process for beef and get customers. And we work with local taxidermists to make sure that we're not wasting any part of the animal. And so we'll create these
Oh, cool.
beautiful
What does
pies.
that process look like?
It's really fun. It's a very long 9 to 10 month process of treatment and tanning and aging. But at the end, you get this beautiful, soft, authentic cattle hide that you can mount on a wall or use as a throw on a couch or as a rug. We take all the sort of leftovers and we give them to neighbors so they can make dog food for the community. There's all sorts of great things that happen as a result of this other life we have that teaches you a lot about politics and vice versa. There's a whole lot of bullshit in both operations, and finding ways around it is really important.
But I imagine, like, you come across a lot of people that don't have the same political leanings that you do in the agricultural space.
I'm either often the only Democrat in my ranching circles or the only rancher in my
Yeah.
Democratic circles, but it gives me a really good perspective on that. I understand why people are freaked out about wolf reintroduction.
Can you elaborate on that, Shad?
Yeah, so as a rancher, I am concerned with wolves being released so close to my cattle because depredation of cattle is a horrifying thing to experience. And wolves are like any other animal, and they're going to go back to where they can find food, especially in these harsh mountain climates. And so, a lot of the ranchers that I speak with come to this issue with a love of nature and with a love for wilderness and wildlife. And nobody wants to be put in a situation where a wolf would ever face any harm, whether that's because they're preying on cattle or because some coward decided to poach them, which is something that
Right.
is disgusting and nobody wants to see either. And so, wanting to be careful and cautious about wolf reintroduction is actually coming from a place of really loving these animals, but also knowing that we have livelihoods to protect and cattle to protect. And so, how can we minimize those conflicts? How can we make sure ranchers are well compensated? And how can we reduce any sort of damage or harm to the wolves? Is the big question that we have to answer. And so I think we can all come at this from a perspective that's less toxic and less us versus them, and figuring out more of a way for us all to live together with the wolves here. Because fact of the matter is, now they've been released and they're here. So let's figure out a way to make this work for everybody.
That was good, Shad. I liked that.
If we just encourage some more conversation and building community, we can find shared solutions because everybody loves wolves. Everybody also loves their cattle and their livelihood. And there's ways to make both of these things work. And I think it's given me the ability to go to different groups of people and find places of commonality where we think they might not exist. And my favorite example is that most ranchers, most farmers, most people in ag agree that climate change is an issue, but let's not talk about it as climate change. Let's talk about it as drought. And let's talk about it as changing
Yeah.
migration patterns of animals. And that can have a huge impact on your grazing. It can have a huge impact on how long you're able to run your sprinkler, how much you're, irrigating and able to actually use your fields, how many animals you can actually keep on your property. And so when you're talking about those types of issues, you're still talking about climate change, but in a way that somebody else can understand and in a way that impacts their daily lives.
So that actually sparked another question for me because this is something I know you know a lot about, and I didn't realize that I should be panicking, but I am. What is the deal with our water? Because,
Oh, man.
a couple months ago, some other state was gonna sue us because they wanna take our water from us. What's going on? And I know you've studied water for a really long time.
Yeah, water is the singular issue facing Colorado as an existential threat. Excuse me. There are of course issues like income inequality, housing, and access to healthcare, and tons of issues that are impacting our communities. But nothing is going to impact us so collectively as this coming debate on water. And so you have the upper basin states like Colorado and Wyoming, and then you have lower basin states like California and Arizona who are seeing massive population growth and way overusing their water allotments from compacts that have been decided for decades and decades and decades between states. And Colorado has always stayed within its means. We always use less water than we're allotted. However, California and Arizona want more and more and more. And so the water that originates in our basin, they want more of. And that's an old Colorado kind of political catchphrase between the mountains and the Denver water users was not one more damn drop. And now we're starting to see that apply down to California and Arizona. And so the coming fight between the upper and lower basin states on how much water each state gets is going to have an enormous impact on people's livelihoods, on the types of lawns and golf courses people want to use and enjoy, but also around the types of water that's used in farms and ranches across the state and across the country. And so, water is the singular existential threat facing our state in the coming years. And Becky Mitchell, who's leading our negotiations, has been a bulldog on this issue for Colorado, which we should all be really grateful for, no matter your party.
So when you talk about Becky Mitchell, is she an attorney? What's she doing?
She is our head negotiator and representative on all sort of the groups debating how that future of water is allocated. And so those conversations happen in a variety of different forums. And she's been really leading the charge for Colorado as a whole, which is great.
The Denver Post did this whole spread about it. It threw me into a panic. I don't even wanna, I, wash my hands as fast as I can and then turn off the water.
I know if I leave the water on, like while I'm brushing teeth or doing dishes for too long, I start to feel a tremendous sense of guilt, especially now that I live in the Western Slope where all the water kind of originates. It's always on top of mind.
Okay, so what do you think's gonna happen? Like, are we gonna solve it? What's gonna happen?
I hope so. I mean, these negotiations are really tense. I think we just got to trust that folks representing Colorado have our interests in mind.
So I remember when I first started on the campaign, Chad, you told me, "Don't talk about wolves, water, and wild horses. Those are, like, the most controversial issues."
And I've talked about two of them now. That's not good. We can talk horses.
Yeah, let's talk horses. What are people still mad about wild horses?
Yeah, people are still mad about wild horses. That's also a big political issue. And actually, Colorado and the governor have been doing a really good job on standing up for wild horses. The federal government will often round them up and move them to facilities across the country, and the horses get hurt and in some cases killed during these
Oh.
roundup operations with helicopters. And so the governor has been great, as has the American Wild Horse Association, in really trying to find a Colorado solution towards these roundups and making sure that we're managing the wild horse population. But I can't believe I've talked about all three things that you're really not supposed to talk about.
Wait, what do you mean with the helicopters? What are the helicopters doing?
I don't know if I'm going to describe this right, but they essentially uh, work to kind of round up the horses because there are these giant herds of wild horses, and they'll use helicopters to kind of push them because of the noise, and the blades are scary, and so the horses will run away from it, and they'll use them to corral the horses and collect them. And in many cases, the horses get scared and hurt
Trample each
or
other.
killed. Yeah, and so it's not the best process, and so folks are constantly trying to find different ways to manage and collect these horses. And so Colorado and the American Wild Horse Association have been working with together to find ways to reduce breeding, to do some population control, to make sure that we keep the wild horse herds managed in a way that nobody feels like they have to go and round up these extra horses that are grazing too much. it's a long, long, long history of cattle versus horses in the country, and so thankfully we're looking for Colorado solutions, but also politically fraught. And everybody could do well to understand each other a little bit more on this issue because it's totally toxic.
I mean, what do you think about that? How, like, it just seems like nobody wants to talk to each other anymore about this stuff. Like, it gets so vitriol so fast.
Yeah, that's what worries me is nobody has friends on the other side of the aisle. And trust me, as chair of the Democratic Party, I am looking to grow our majorities. I don't want to see Republicans in any office. If I can elect a Democrat, I'll do that. That said, one of my friends, and this is probably going to hurt his campaign, is Jerry Sonnenberg, who's running for Congress in CD4. And he knows I'm not going to back up or do anything that will help him. He knows that I'm going to be out there trying to make sure he doesn't serve in Congress. But we also have to be willing to put some of those things aside to recognize, maybe Jerry can help me with some of my cattle problems I have. So maybe we'll give Jerry a call on some of these issues. We don't have to talk politics, but he knows something about this that I don't. And so I think we need to be able to have those types of relationships, and um, I think it's very healthy to want to make sure that Jerry Sonnenberg doesn't ever serve in Congress because he is as far right as they come. Um, but we can also acknowledge that maybe he can be a good friend too.
Okay, so you are a history buff. And
Hmm.
I've never okay, there's two things, interesting things about you. You're a history buff and you collect pens.
Yes. Oh God.
So tell me why, what is the moment in time in history that you're very focused on? And then I want to
Hmm.
talk about how to become a pen collector.
So history, I'm very, very focused on the Civil War, and in particular, I love Ulysses S. Grant. He's my favorite president, and he is a working class kid who rose up the ranks to become an incredible general. Suffered setback after setback after setback, some imposed by himself and his own flaws, some by just his inability to have access to the type of wealth and social network that his upbringing didn't provide him.
So tell me about pens.
I'm using a Pilot G207 right now, which is my all-time favorite pen. But yeah, I for a time and still do collect some fountain pens. I mostly try to find old ones, and so I just find old American-made fountain pens and try to latch onto those and buy a few. They're all like either made of metal or really, really high quality materials, and the nibs are really nice, and they're just very
So do you
satisfying.
use them? Like, do you buy an old pen and use it, or do you like put it in a box and store it?
No, I use it when I'm not getting made fun of for it. So I mostly use them privately, but sometimes I take them out to take notes with. But they're really nice for when you're thinking. They're really good pens to just like write and think with. They're definitely not like speed note taking pens, but I use them
Do you do the
whenever.
pen flip? Are you one of those people that do the pen flip?
Yeah, I have a lot of broken pens as a result. But yeah, I do.
I do not do the do you have a feather pen?
No, I thankfully have not gone that far down the rabbit hole,
Oh,
but I'll need somebody to pull me out if I do. That might be too far.
well, I would have been more impressed if you had a feather. But you go to pen shows, like, you've gone to a pen show before.
I have gone to a pen show. I haven't been since the
Oh
pandemic.
my god, that's amazing. Well, I have a Sharpie, which
Oh,
I
that's good.
actually believe I bought these because you recommended them.
Yeah, those are good
Have you
ones.
ever used a pen with all the ink?
These I go through like one every couple weeks. I go through these really, really
Wow!
fast. It's
So
always
from
fun.
start to end, you've used the same pen before. I don't think I've ever done that.
Oh yeah, I use these pens all the time. I like take it with me everywhere.
Okay, so the next episode I want you on is to walk me through the Civil War. I don't think we think about that enough because in my other episode, it was brought up that the Civil War was actually an insurrection, which had like totally blew my mind. I had no idea that that was an insurrection. So I feel like we need a quick 30-minute check in with Shad on the Civil War and Ulysses S. Grant.
Yes, I will happily do a seminar on Ulysses S. Grant if anyone will listen to it. I
I
don't. I
love
think
your
that'll
little
be like your
sketch. It's so
lowest
good.
listened to episode, but at least it'll be out there.
Oh, it's all right. My dad will listen.
No, I think it's really important for folks to understand that time period because it's we've always been divided. We've always had these big existential questions about who we are as a country. And at that time, it was allowed to explode into full-on violence. And that war was about slavery. And so that was about an extreme example of how racism manifests itself in America. And right now, we're taking a look at all sorts of questions about what type of democracy do we want to have? What type of country do we want to have?
Time's up, Shad. Do you have anything else you want to say before we hang up?
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciated the chance to nerd out with you on water, wolves, horses, and the Civil War.
All the things you shouldn't talk about.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming by. We'll get you in here for your Civil War seminar pretty soon.
Yeah, I think that'll be a tough one for people to get through.
Thank you for watching Alvina Talks Shift. Please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, engage, empower, evolve. If you liked this episode, or if you want more content like this, go to alvinatalksshift.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.